Guess who got brands talking? Brandlive.co.za.
Howdy, folks. Friday, happy Friday to everyone. Friday, as you know, is the day that we all live for, you know what I mean? Everyone has got a spring in their step. I've just come to the studio now. The guys are smiling from ear to ear because they're anticipating a fun weekend. I am not flying alone. As you know, I'm with my wife, and this is the fashion blueprint at 27 Boxes, brandlive.co.za.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Thank you for a great introduction as always. It's been like quite a crazy week, a very busy week. We are excited to be here. It's always good to have you guys. Yeah, we're looking ahead at, it was a week of the manufacturing in Durban. What a steep learning curve. Just when you think you understand, then you really learn. What was your highlight?
For me, it was just about, opening the eyes. And, there are opportunities there, but, sometimes you just get so caught up in your own everyday struggle that you don't realize that, wonderful opportunities are there. The government is there to assist us, and they want us to succeed at all costs. That's the message that I got from DTI. We have become a household brand, and they were like, look, guys, your success is our success. The more South Africa is able to get involved in all forms of trade. When we say manufacturing, it's not only clothing. It's everything from meters to telecoms to car parts to everything available there. And trying to basically establish a class of black industrialists. We have been an open market for the last 24 years, and now the opportunity lies in our hands. And how do we take that opportunity? And that was the interesting thing for me. As everyone knows, I come from a meat background. My family was in meat, and we always wanted to become industrialists. But it's so nice to be able to go to a function like this and for them to tangibilize and crystallize what an industrialist is.
Yes, it was quite eye-opening. I think also to have big business in manufacturing and small businesses, from the guy who sells honey, who makes honey in the Eastern Cape, to your heavy industrialists.
Doing catalytic converters for BMW.
Those kind of things, and quite a proud moment. One of our favorite clients, Mrs. Vuso, had a beautiful stand. It was nice to see her at work. And then she goes on to win best stand for the conference. It was amazing, because when I speak to her, she was like, I'm in China, I'm in Hong Kong. And I didn't know what she does, and it's quite different once you see it in real life. So that was quite exciting.
And also, I think understanding that government can only do so much in terms of creating jobs, creating work, and things like that. And just seeing the backbone of the economy, the nuts and bolts, the people that employ the most people, the people that are exporting the most, the people that are basically running the country from an entrepreneurial and a business perspective. I think that was like a major highlight.
And also, one of the things, when we did our export course, one of the things that, we learned and discovered was just what a big market the SADC region is for us, particularly because of all the inter-regional trade agreements that have been signed. And so at the manufacturing in Durban, it was quite great to have a few of the African players, just to understand how they're doing it and how they're viewing it, and to establish the linkages between what we do. Because at the end of the day, Africa is the only continent whose population will double by 2050. And funny enough, South Africa is not on that list. We are on a decline because we've urbanized faster than most people, so life in the cities is a bit more expensive. Like a population like Nigeria is going to be, we're looking at 1.9 billion, not Nigeria, I mean Africa, in the next 30 years,
Wow.
30 to 20 years. Where at the moment the world population is, I think it's about what? In Africa it's about 1 billion. Yeah, Africa has 1 billion people at the moment. So projections are somewhere between 1.9 and 1.8, with South Africa having a slow growth rate. But the good news there is that this market is so huge, and if we do things right, we can really see Africa rising as a giant. Everyone says so. Everyone keeps saying outside of Africa, Africa is a breadbasket. Africa can do this. And what's funny now is, is that, but people don't always know how to network it. So I think it is exciting that these opportunities are opening up. And another thing that was quite talking about African trade is the fact that we need to think of ourselves as countries that do not compete, but supply chains compete. Meaning, we cluster our industries in ways that make sense, and you specialize. You must specialize in what you're good at as a region. If you now also link it to the whole BRICS thing. For instance, there was a guy there from Kisua, which is a clothing brand. He's from Ghana, and I don't know if he's from Ghana, Nigeria, or Senegal, but he's from one of those countries. The story was relating basically the relevance of mentioning him is that the way our trade and manufacturing in Africa is so disjointed. He produces in South Africa and he buys fabrics from all over the world. So if he buys a fabric in Ghana, brings it to South Africa, manufactures and sells it, supplies a shop in Ghana, he pays tariffs as if the fabric didn't come from Ghana at all. It has got no connection.
Right, so they want like a bit of an EU vibe.
Basically, an economic trade zones. I think they do exist. I just think we have the same problem that manufacturing has the same problem that we've identified. And well, not we alone, but one of those problems that people speak about in fashion. The fact that there's so much happening, but the information is not flowing through. For instance, like people in fashion, are they aware? Is everybody aware of the benefits of Goa, if there are? What about the SADC trade regions where there are probably no tariffs? I mean, I think we should all be paying attention to tariffs with the trade war that is going on in the world. How Trump is just shaking things up in a Trump kind of way. And then obviously the topic, you talk manufacturing, you talk big industries, it leads us to the big Asian tiger, China.
Yes, and we had a very interesting conversation with a man called Mr. Fabellion, who's been living in China for the last 25 years, and him opening our minds and our eyes up to China. We always think that China wants to export to everywhere, but China is a very hungry country with a huge population, an appetite for commodities. Unique things coming from South Africa, and he highlighted, obviously a majority of what is being traded between South Africa and China is, your golds, your coal, and things like that. But now he's saying that after the first sort of revolution in China, now they, the population and the middle class is growing. So how do we feed that? And unlike anywhere else in the world, the middle class is growing exponentially. They produce literally thousands of millionaires every single year. And how do we tap into that market? Because these people, obviously, they begin to travel. Their tastes start to change. Yes, you are Chinese, but you've had you've had South African wine, you've had South African honey, you've had South African fruit. How do you now go back to China and be able to get the same thing? And that's what he was opening us up to.
Yeah, like also what was quite interesting is, as you so say, the complexity of the Chinese market, the fact that we seem to think, as much as the Chinese have stereotypes about us, we also have, and I'll talk about that a little bit because I thought it was quite funny, we also have our own stereotypes about China when we think of China as a market, that we think of just one big homogeneous market of people who want the best for nothing and the consume. We also forget that China has also a huge gap, probably one of the biggest in the world, between the rich and the poor. As much as you've got all these millionaires who are wanting things, you also have a class of people who are nowhere near there, and it's also a market. You've got a whole lot of different markets in between, and so it makes it very complex and interesting in the sense that
diverse,
and very, very diverse. Well, you talk diversity, the Chinese, they invented it. One of the slides, I think you'll remember, when they showed us the different, just the different brands of noodles in a supermarket, it was mind-boggling. How do you choose? How do you how do people get attention? How does your product get attention in that kind of market? And these are questions. Sure, we're not there yet, but we also, like, as retailers and brands and designers, we also are grappling with those kind of issues. How do you get attention to your brand? How do you send your message across? How do you stand out? You know, I will go on to say that, you know, as those brands that started, you know, the Stone Cherries, the Bonyolas that came in the early 2000s, we were very lucky. There wasn't as much clutter in the world. We were able to pick up the phone. Also, you know, we were able to pick up the phone and call people, call magazines and say, we've got this great product. But for today's designers, it's not so easy. But there are also other advantages. How do you get your brand out there? And so when you talk the Chinese market, that's exactly what you're talking about. And also what's great is that, like you say, they are hungry on all levels. You just gotta go in there, do your homework. That's actually what was important about that Chinese workshop. The fact that you need to do your homework. We take things for granted. You need to check yourself. And I'll admit, I you know, that we have a trip coming up to China, and it was more of, I thought, okay, let's go and find out. But I actually realized what a great opportunity, and one needs to be ready. It's quite serious. It's a lot more serious than we think. And yeah, it's talking about the stereotypes, I wanted to mention. So the lady that was presenting, she's Chinese Filipino, and she was saying, you know, when the Chinese think of South Africa, of Africa, maybe South Africa, in fact, no, when they think of South Africa, they think exotic cultures. So they'll show a picture of Zulu dancers wearing leopard prints. That's what they think. Oh, exotic cultures. They think gold. They think safari. That's all. And Nelson Mandela. And she was saying, like, when she's sitting with her friends, and she's like, oh my God, you should try the South African wine. They look at it like, what? South Africa has wines?
Yeah.
You know, you think that girls like her of a certain, who do certain jobs, like globetrotters, in her circles, they would know that South Africa does wine. Like, I know that California does wine, and many other, like Portuguese wine. I mean, you know, the same way we know. But obviously that speaks to us, marketing ourselves, presenting a different picture of what Africa's about. I think we've got a great opportunity, especially also with the Ramaphoria, you know, a new president who's chasing investment and doing everything he can. He's targeting apparently $3 trillion US dollars in the next 3.5 years, new direct investment coming into the country. So,
okay, and talk about $3 trillion. Apiwa is giving me the look. We've got to pay bills. We'll be back on the other side of this, guys. Please keep it on lock.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za, an industry first in the world of internet radio. Not only are we an internet radio station, we are an internet radio platform for your brand. So why not expose your brand to potentially thousands of listeners and improve your customer relationships and brand equity with podcasts and live broadcasts? Be sure to check brandlive.co.za for more information. brandlive.co.za, harnessing the power of internet radio.
The Dramatic Talk with myself, Bongani Drama, bringing you insightful conversations on the Convo Corner, your latest celebrity news on Dramatainment, and your latest fashion news on Fashion Fade.
This is Bongani.
And myself, Rose Rataha, bringing you your latest news and sports updates.
Every Wednesdays, 2 to 3 p.m. Only on www.brandlive.co.za.
The station with the best music.
I love the music.
Best music.
This one is explosive.
brandlive.co.za.
Lunatic, 'cause I do what I want, and I get what I want when I want it. You know life can be so ordinary. Boy meets girl, they said oh make a baby.
brandlive.co.za.
Brandlive.co.za, back on attack. Yeah, we were talking about the manufacturing in Daba. initiative. It was DTI, CEDA, Department of Arts and Culture, just basically bringing all manufacturing in South Africa under one roof and getting us to cohesively plot a way forward, you know. What does manufacturing mean in South Africa? What does being a black industrialist mean in South Africa? How do we achieve this within a generation? You know what I mean? For me, what I notice is that we must be very strategic in what we do, in that this is a war. And in war, you know, the battles have to be won over a period of time. So we mustn't be too hard on ourselves, but at the same time, we cannot afford to be complacent. And, you know, myself as a clothing manufacturer, I want to see myself, you know, obviously improving the way that I do my thing. And, you know, the opportunity is there for us to export uniquely South African goods, not only to China, but the rest of the world as well. And I think that was a very strong underlying message, you know. If you think of people that are producing mohair, people that are producing honey, people, especially in the agri-processing field, which is, you know, your vegetables, your citrus. South Africa has got, you know, a huge potential there. We are exporting, but, you know, not as much as we should, and not at a grassroots level as well. I think that's the most important thing. Things must start filtering down to the grassroots level, because wine has done well, fruit has done well from a highly industrial point of view, but how does the lower income grassroots level farmer get involved in agri-processing from an export point of view, and sustainably so?
I think the exciting things, once you actually delve deeper, one of also the interesting things was, you know, that 53% of the new global markets are concentrated between 3 countries, and that's why we're really spending so much time on China. It's China, Indonesia, and India. And there has been so much obviously done on China due to its complexity.
I think the East in general, the East and the Middle East in general is coming up strong.
No, definitely. And at the moment, if I remember correctly, our exports to China are about 1.4 billion. And our president is saying we must take them to 5 billion. And there's obviously a bit of a trade deficit. We still we still import more than we export. But also what was very interesting were the kind of products that are being sold that the Chinese can't get enough of when you actually get to listen. Besides obviously textiles, things like meat, fish, fruit, and vegetables. And another amazing thing was that, you know, like we've only had 20 years of diplomatic relations with China. And I think we started exporting a citrus to them in about 2006. Prior to that, America was their leading partner. Now South Africa is exporting more citrus to China than America. So I think it's great. You can imagine that it opens up to other products, our wines and everything else, our fashion, and all those kinds of things. So it's really exciting, and we look forward to it. And also, what was great was also understanding how to. They spoke of, like, obviously the key themes, how to penetrate the Chinese market just broadly. One of the first things they said was you need to be locally relevant.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you remember the local relevance. An example of what local relevance when you enter a new market is was KFC. How well KFC can be relevant. Like, they have products in India and China, and I think Philippines and Colombia, that they don't sell in any other KFC in the world. For instance, like the Chinese, they like to eat the porridge in the morning. So KFC has come up with a product like that. And that's really the what they talk about when they talk of, like, local relevance. Be willing.
Yeah, also go and explore the market. Understand what the market is about, you know? And you can't just design in a silo. You've got to go see what the market is doing, how the market is going to be, and then adapt your product accordingly. Otherwise, you're just going to be left with...
of course, you can't impose. I think you can impose on the market. And an example of that in retail was, like we've mentioned before, is Zara. When they went into Morocco, that they had to, and if they were to make money and sell, they had to take cognizance of the fact that it's a Muslim country. So
more conservative.
So the sleeves had to be a little bit longer. the hemlines dropped. That's now, being locally relevant. And if you think of the South African content are a united voice and we have a seat at the table, I think we would be able to negotiate. And the second thing she spoke about was
Understanding the gap between the rich and the poor.
yes, definitely, and not to underestimate it too, in the sense that, like we were saying, it's how many people are we talking about in China?
It's 1 billion, 2 billion, close to 2 billion people.
Exactly. So you can, and also the fact that China has urbanized and industrialized and developed at such a fast rate.
And
You
the
can
fact
imagine.
that tastes are changing very quickly.
There we go. And also the gaps between those tastes have also widened in the sense that you probably have there's a market for everyone. So that's why they're saying don't underestimate the gap between the rich and the poor.
It makes segmentation that much easier, if you think about it.
Yes, but be more
Because
aware and
you can there's
target
so many
better.
layers. There's so many layers in this market that you can target better and be more specific with your targeting, with obviously a wide population, and that's where your success will lie. And then the next point was
and they
tap
said
into the common mindset.
exactly tap into the common mindset as in understand what is topical, understand what people care about, and get into it. And I think the next point was you harness the power of
digital.
the power of digital
We
platforms.
can't express this enough, obviously with internet, with Instagram and all these other things. The tools are there basically, and you can do everything from your house. You don't have to go out and have huge advertising spend and things like that to get exposure. So obviously tapping into the digital mindset and the power of digital is very important.
Sure, when you think of digital mindset and the third point they mentioned of tap into the local mindset, one of the things that is huge in China is celebrity endorsements. They had a slide with an actress she's a blogger, and an actor from India I've never seen. I saw Miss World, former Miss India, and former Miss World. But this lady is a spokesperson for Neutrogena, and she made $43 last year. Million, by being what do you call it? She's an influencer. She's what in South Africa we call an influencer. A taste maker. Like you blog about the product, and because people are making money. These are new and interesting ways of making money, and something that's very important for like the kids thinking of going into careers. What you do. And the fifth one was don't underestimate the local competition. It seems like a lot of people when they go into China, they often think that they're going into like possibly uncharted territories. This is what they're saying, don't underestimate it. Also because distribution in China is not a joke.
Yeah.
China is so huge, it's
But
so
also,
complex.
if you think about it, you read the stats on China. Everybody knows about these stats. How big, the market, not only in China, but in the East is. Everyone in the world is thinking the same thing at the same time. So when you go there, you're not going to be the only one. There is no ways that you're going to be there.
Sure. And then lastly, my favorite was realize the importance of perception and storytelling. That narrative, that's what people are buying into. What makes you who you are? Why are you here? How did you get here?
And what are your intentions? And how are you going to enhance and make our lives better, basically?
And some of the stories, and if talking from a fashion perspective and working with designers, especially at the developmental level, they underestimate their unique, beautiful stories. Everyone has a unique story to tell. Like, I'll know somebody for like years, and I will never know that actually in their family, this fashion ran in the family, as in their grandmother was a seamstress, and their mother possibly maybe was a seamstress, or it just goes back generations, and it's like such a rich heritage. But I think because we've undervalued those kinds of things as a nation, it's not a thing that people think they can sell. But this is what the world wants. They want your narrative. Why are you here? What brought you here?
I suppose
what is the message? You just have to realize that if you are selling a product, if you have a brand, you're a messenger one way or another.
Like all ethnic people, Chinese are great storytellers, and they want a story, If you think of ethnicities across the world, whether it's in South America, Africa, Asia, or in North America, people love a good story. If you think of Mexicans as well, everyone wants a story. It just enhances what you do. it makes the vision and the picture of what you're doing that much more clearer.
Yeah, no, I think my favorite quote from the facilitator said is clearly as you commit more, you need to do more due diligence. You gotta work a lot harder, but some of these things are accessible. We can relate to them. Things like what he's saying about the digital media and the importance of key opinion leaders, and also another thing they mentioned under that was how the word of mouth is still the best way of selling and referrals. That you need people telling other people about
Exciting
your product.
stories about
and that
what you do.
in China, something like that, it holds a lot of water. People value that. If your product can get into people's hearts, not even in people's minds. If your product can get
Like
into
David
people's
Beckham.
hearts, they you know how huge they are. Him and Porsche, love the Beckhams. So basically, you need to have a story and package it and sell it and back it up with a good product. Don't underestimate what is happening around you, and also look at collaborations, which I would want to do when I go into China. Obviously, that's
So you've got to, like Villain I said, you've got to stop, collaborate, and listen.
listen.
Okay, guys,
We've got a
listen.
brand new mission.
Flows like a harpoon daily at night. Okay, guys, it's time to say goodbye again. It's amazing how time flies. As soon as I leave here, I think, I've got the rest of the week, and next thing I'm sitting right at this place. This is the Fashion Blueprint. This is where we talk the business of fashion, the business of selling fashion, and the business of creating black industrials in the fashion space. 27 boxes, brandlive.co.za. We'll catch you next week. Thank you very much. Siyabulela bantu basekhaya.
Thank you very much. See you next week.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.